Can you all hear me on Zoom? Can you all hear me on Zoom? Yes. Yeah. I mean, can you all?
Hi, Megan. It's Mark. There's just an echo. I think you're going through, you may already know this, going through two microphones, maybe. If you can mute,
Yeah.
maybe
The
computer.
mic actually here is not on.
Oh,
I'm trying
okay.
to figure out.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just the echo. Like my mic is not on. I'm sorry, guys. We're trying to figure out the technical
Makes sense.
difficulties. Yeah. So I have no sound on my laptop. And I have no mic on. Let me try now. Can you guys hear me now? Yes, they can hear me now. I don't know what you did, but it worked. Okay, you guys can hear me. There's no background.
No background. It sounds great.
Okay, great. All right. Well, happy week after Memorial Day. Okay, well, I think we'll call the meeting to order. We do have a packed agenda, so I'll call the meeting to order. I just want to note that my co-chair will not be present. Neither will any of the legislators, just because session is in session, and they are caucusing at the moment. So I will run the meeting, and the first thing I just want to do is just go through the welcome introduction of council members. So I'm going to start with the folks in the room and then move to the folks on Zoom. So Joe, you want to start?
Good afternoon. I'm Joe DeTuno. I'm the Director of Family Services, part of Connecticut's Judicial Branch.
Shauna?
Shauna Harrington, Director of Legal Advocacy at CCADB.
Karen?
Karen Foley O'Connor, CEO of the Network Against Domestic Abuse.
I'm Megan Scanlon, the CEO of CCADV and co-chair of the council. Chief?
Good afternoon, all. Alaric Fox from the Enfield Police Department on behalf of the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association.
Great. And Phyllis?
Yes, good afternoon. Attorney Phyllis DeCara, member of the board.
Merritt?
Good afternoon, Merritt LaJoy, Complaint Officer for the Office of the Victim Advocate.
Great. Nancy?
Hi, good afternoon. Nancy Tyler, attorney and survivor representative through CCADV.
Great. Andrea? Or Andrea, sorry.
Good afternoon, Andrea O'Connor, Family Violence Victim Advocate Program Manager for the Umbrella Center for Domestic Violence Services.
Gail?
Good afternoon, everyone. Gail Hardy from the Office of the Chief State's Attorney and also co-chair of the Arrest Warrants and Orders of Protection Subcommittee.
Great. Mark?
Hi, good afternoon. Mark Palka, Judicial Branch, Office of Victim Services, Deputy Director. Happy to be here today. Thank you.
And Captain Maynard?
Good afternoon, Captain Ryan Maynard, Connecticut State Police.
Great. And we'll introduce Tammy in a little bit. She's one of our guests. All right. So next item on the agenda is just the approval of the February meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to
Motion to
approve?
approve, Fox.
Great. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any edits, corrections?
Yes, Megan. This is Gail Hardy. Because of a number of changes with the room at the last meeting, I was unable to stay. So the minutes should be corrected to show that I did not attend.
Okay, thank you. Any other edits or corrections? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of the minutes with the corrections by Gail?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, awesome, thank you. All right, moving on through the agenda. So we are very, very fortunate that we have an incredibly powerful presenter and researcher here today, Tammy Sullivan, who CCADV has actually worked with quite a bit over the years. If you don't know Dr. Sullivan, she's a licensed psychologist. She has an extensive clinical background working with victims and offenders of intimate partner violence. and providing a range of services and community programs and inpatient and outpatient clinics. And she's also done an incredible amount of research centered on individual and system level factors that affect the well-being of victims of intimate partner violence. So you all in your packet got one of the most recent research papers that Dr. Sullivan had worked very hard on, but she's also here today to present to us around the topic of firearms. So without further ado, I will hand the Zoom and the in-person meeting over to Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Megan. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you for the kind and warm introduction, probably a bit overstated, but I appreciate being here, and I'm curious as to what paper everybody got. But I'm happy to be invited to talk with you today about firearm threat. I'm going to share my screen, which I assume will work seamlessly, or I
You
hope.
should be able to share it, yeah.
Okay, are we all set there?
Yes, we can all see it.
Fantastic. I'm not going to monitor the chat while I'm presenting. So if anything comes up, if someone can flag me to let me know, that would be fantastic. I can see you, Megan. So if you can flag me to let me know, that would be great. I was asked to speak for an hour today, but if you want me to go shorter than that, if you need to cut me off, just let me know. And if there's something important that folks want to cut me off for, feel free. But I was asked to talk with you today about firearm threat among community women experiencing intimate partner violence. And this isn't, though this is all based on research, this isn't really going to be a research heavy presentation in the way kind of that I share information. And I don't use research heavy language. That's just not my style overall. I hope this is really useful to you. It's meant to be useful to you. So feel free to ask questions. If I can't answer them today, I certainly will get back to you with the answer. So first, want to start with a very strong note of gratitude for the women who chose to participate in this study. They shared deeply personal experiences and entrusted us with their information. And it's for these women and others like them that this project was conducted. There was also exceptional research team. Obviously, I did not do this by myself, and we had exceptional partners here, the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the Umbrella Center for DV Services, the National Collaborative on Gun Violence Research, and also, of course, the Connecticut Judicial Branch for sharing information about offenders and the Protective Order Registry. In terms of our funder, we were funded by the National Collaborative on Gun Violence Research, one of the few organizations that has been funding gun violence research. And I'm just going to dive right in. Why were they willing to fund this study? So some of you may or may not know some of this information. So women experiencing intimate partner violence have a greater prevalence of firearms in their home than the general population. That's across the country. That's not just specific to Connecticut. And that's been established by research for, I think, almost 2 decades. But the majority of firearms and IPV research has focused largely on homicides and near homicides. And I'm not here to say that's not an important focus. Obviously, it is. But firearms are also used for lots of other reasons, and they're used in lots of non-lethal ways to threaten, to coerce, and intimidate. But there's very little research on firearms used in this way. And at the time we developed the application, there was almost no research on this, and certainly no research on explicit and implicit firearm threat. And the research that had been conducted at that time was largely retrospective and cross-sectional. So what does that mean? It basically means, like most research that's done, people who participated had been asked over the last 6 months, how often did these things happen to you? Right. And so that kind of research is really important, but it limits our understanding of what happens in the day-to-day lives of the people that we come in contact with, because most of us don't live in 6 months chunks. We live from minute to minute, hour to hour. And sometimes those minutes, hours, and days are really critical in understanding how we can provide support and prevent significant injury and even death. So the gap was that there was really little research to help us understand what goes on day to day. And there's this type of research called a micro longitudinal design. This kind of research really affords the opportunity to help us understand people's lived experiences at the day level and identify factors that can increase risk or provide protection against firearm threat. And so our study, which was really an exploratory study, it wasn't driven by hypotheses, it wasn't driven by theory. It was really meant to explore what's going on. We were really aiming to fill some of these gaps. And so we were really hoping to understand what's going on for each individual person. Unlike other studies, which group, 200, 500, 1,000 people's experiences together, we weren't really looking to do that. We were looking to understand how things are experienced by individual people and how those things unfold over time. I'm not going to be able to give you all of the findings. We haven't been able to get through all of the data. It takes a lot of time. But the idea is that we'll use this with in-person information to time and target interventions to prevent or reduce firearm-related harms and to inform policy, hence this group. So a traditional study is what this is, but it has an embedded micro-longitudinal study, which is a once-a-day study. So when women come into the study, they participate in a traditional interview where they tell us, where they tell us about what happened in the 3 months before they came into the study. That's a typical kind of cross-sectional or kind of look back study. What happened in the 3 months before you came in? I'm going to call that baseline for the rest of the presentation. Then for the next 90 days, so 3 months, for the next 90 days, they were asked to complete a survey every day. During that daily survey, they were asked to tell us what happened the day before. And those questions were about partner violence, so psychological abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. They were asked about social support. They were asked about safety strategies, domestic violence service utilization. We asked them about who they came in contact with, what they did to take care of themselves, a host of things. And then we asked them to come in at the end of the study for a follow-up interview where we asked them about things that happened in the prior 3 months that we couldn't ask in the daily surveys. The daily surveys are brief. If they're not brief, people drop out of the study. So they took like 5 minutes to complete max. These interviews are like 2.5 hours long. Like we provide lunch. They're very different types of interviews. The daily surveys are like 5 minutes. So what is a micro-longitudinal study or a micro-longitudinal design? Basically, they capture lived experiences. So if you think about it, I guess most simply, think about filling out a survey on your smartphone and doing that every day. When you do that, you're able to share your experiences or your data from a research perspective. You're able to do that with great frequency. Whereas if you come in to participate in a study once, you're doing that one time and you're reporting back and trying to remember what happened in your life over the past 3 months or 6 months. I don't know about you, but at 52, there are lots of things I can't remember with accuracy that's happened to me or about me in the last 3 months. So these micro-longitudinal studies allow people to tell us what's going on very frequently and in near real time. And also in your natural environment, right? If I said, well, how about you come into my office at Yale and we're going to have a conversation about what's going on in your life. Your experience sharing information in my office hopefully would be a positive one. We do everything we can to make it more comfortable. Everyone's trained in trauma-informed interviews. There's a whole lot we do to make sure that the person's experience is the most comfortable it can be. But still, you've had to fight New Haven traffic. You've got to figure out where to park. Like there's all of these things that get in the way of you feeling the most comfortable you can feel. But when you're filling out a survey on your phone at home, you're sitting at your desk, you're on your couch. It's more natural. You're doing it on a bus on the way to work, whatever it is, you're having a more natural experience. So the benefits of this kind of study, it reduces bias of trying to recall things that happened a long time ago or weeks ago or months ago. It improves what's called ecological validity. So for example, if you were to ask me about my stress level after my partner and I got in a fight, Well, I'm answering that the day after it happens, and I'm answering it at home, perhaps where it happened. I'm certainly going to answer that in a different way than I would if I was in Megan's office or something. These methods also allow researchers to identify things that are related close in time. So I can analyze data that are closer in time with greater accuracy, which is different than happens when you come into an office and report about things that happened 3 months ago. And so you can use these information in a different way to inform more precise interventions. Let me tell you a little bit about how women were invited to participate. And you're going to hear this COVID piece a couple of times because it's really unfortunate and really important. So the study was implemented during COVID. It could not have been a worse time. Women were invited to participate from the community via flyers that said Women's Relationship Study. None of these flyers said, are you in an abusive relationship? None of these flyers said, have you been threatened with a firearm? Does your partner hurt you? Nothing like that. They only said Women's Relationship Study. Have you been in a relationship with a man? Because the study was about committed heterosexual relationships. In order to be able to participate, a person had to self-identify as a woman, be in a committed relationship with a man in the past 3 months in which they experienced repeated psychological or an instance of physical intimate partner violence. They needed to read or speak English or Spanish because we did this in both languages, and they had to have a smartphone so that they could download the app. Again, COVID, did I say COVID? So this was supposed to be a study that invited women to participate from flyers in the community, from inviting women from the court, meaning women who met with victim advocates. And we've done this in protective order studies that we did before and in other projects. And it's worked out really, really well because we know that women that come into the contact with the court system because their partners are arrested look different than women who are in just the community in general. We're also supposed to be able to recruit from domestic violence service providers and largely shelters during COVID. Obviously, everything was compromised during COVID. You all know way better than I do that court systems were not operating as normal, neither were domestic violence service providers and shelters. So we were fortunate to get permission to do the study at all through Yale. And could not invite women from the court or domestic violence service providers through until the last few weeks. So this is a sample of largely women recruited from the community. In terms of eligibility to participate, based on that initial screening to see, are you someone who's experienced abuse? Those questions were mixed in with lots of other questions so that women wouldn't know what it would take to get into the study. We had about half who were eligible for experiencing psychological abuse alone, and about half who had experienced physical abuse. Of course, the physical abuse always co-occurred with psychological abuse. Women were surveyed once a day for 90 days in that period that I showed you, and we had 16,104 responses of daily surveys. In terms of the 243 women that participated, this is just some information about their average, about their average age, monthly income, their racial and ethnic breakdown, age breakdown. And to me, this is so important to mention. The average relationship length, and this is true in nearly all of my studies. I've been at Yale for 24 years. I asked this question in all of my studies at the time that people participate in the study. How long have you been with your partner? The average is between 5.8 years and about 7.5. This is longer than most. They've been with their partners for 7.69 years. These are not quick relationships. These are not quick relationships. We had 42% living with their partner and a little less than a third that had broken up in the last 3 months. In terms of their IPV experiences, once they got into the study and told us more about the relationships, not just the screening questions, in bold, you can see those who experienced physical abuse. We had about half. All experienced psychological abuse, sexual abuse. These, again, were by their current partner. Almost a third had experienced sexual abuse. 63% had experienced unwanted pursuit behaviors, which used to be called stalking. And I will share these slides. Megan had asked if I would share the slides. I will. So for the folks who want to take notes, don't feel the need to write feverishly. I will share. So I'm going to share information both from that first interview or that baseline interview. Those data or those pieces of information describe the people, not kind of their daily experiences necessarily. I'll get into the daily data in a little bit. But in terms of that baseline data, what do we know about women's experiences of firearm threat that they've had across their lifetime and with their current partner? So we know that 35% of women experienced firearm threat by any partner across their lifetime. So we had 90 women in the study, and they're in the study because they've experienced firearm threat by a current partner, but 90 of them had experienced firearm threat by any partner across their lifetime. Right? Remember, they got into the study just because they had experienced physical or psychological abuse. So they did not get into the study because of firearm threat. But 90 of them, 35% of the women who participated, had experienced firearm threat. Reminder, it's a community sample. This is not a sample of people from the court or from domestic violence services. So we know that these rates are lower than if we had been able to recruit women from the court or from domestic violence services. The threats were 20% explicit, which means, and I'll tell you a little bit more about this, they had a gun pointed at them, et cetera, or implicit, like their partner made a threat, like I'm going to shoot you when they had well, that would have been explicit. They were waving a gun around during a fight, even though they didn't say they would shoot them. I'll tell you more about explicit and implicit threats in a moment. 15% were threatened by their current abusive partner at some point in their relationship with a firearm. So it was 39 women. And you can see the explicit threat was 3.9% and implicit threat was 14. So again, from that baseline interview, let me move my controls so you can see a little bit better. I don't know if it's blocking your screen. Okay. So these two columns, this is explicit threat. The first column says any partner. So again, this is any partner in their lifetime. And then when it says current partner, that is their current partner who is abusive, but may or may not have threatened them with a firearm. So I'm not going to read every single one of these columns or cells. Folks can take this all in. The total at the top is explicit threat. 20% of women had been explicitly threatened with a firearm. That includes having a gun pointed at them or any of the things below. The next cells include, you can see the row is blank. When he was either holding the gun or had it on him, that row is blank because the next 3 rows are about that. So he said he was going to shoot himself when he was either holding the gun or had it on him. Said he was going to shoot you when he was either holding the gun or had it on him. Said he was going to shoot your family or friends when he was either holding the gun or had it on him. Some people might be pausing to say, why do you have it in here that said he was going to shoot himself? Because we know about homicide, suicide, and we know that that can often be a strategy to coerce women, threaten women. And again, we know about homicide, suicide, so we did include it here. Whether they were hit with a gun, had a gun held to their head, shot a gun to scare you, or shot at you, but the bullet didn't hit you and then shot you. And then the next column is by a current partner. Okay. Next is implicit threat. We mostly only have this for current partner because the surveys were so long. We have a whole survey on the firearm threat assessment, which I can share with Megan. We just couldn't ask every single question. I think it's like, I don't know how many pages. I think it's like 13 pages long if we print it. So we didn't ask every question because the focus of this really was much more about the current partner. So we didn't ask every single question of every partner across the lifetime. So that's why we don't have all of these data for any partner. But you can see in terms of implicit threat, overall, it's 33% current partner, 33%. I have this mixed up. And for current partner, it's 38%. And this is something like brought out a gun during an argument but didn't say anything about it. You can think about how you don't really need to say anything about it. If you are the abusive partner, you have a gun, you bring it out, you don't need to say anything about it to send a message about what it's there for. Waved a gun around, said he would shoot you even when not holding a gun, cleaned a gun in front of you to create a feeling of fear or to intimidate. And then there are others. Some other statistics I'll share. On average, women experience 9 incidents of firearm threat. For perspective, this is among women who experience firearm threat. The range is 1 to 228 threat incidents. So it's pretty broad. For this group in particular, I'm guessing you're interested to understand criminal justice involvement by current partners. 8% of the women who participated had partners who were arrested with the participant as the identified victim in the charge. Okay, so you have to think about how we pulled this data. So we had 243 women from the community. We handed off those data. Thank you, Joe DeTuno, in the Connecticut Judicial Branch. We handed off the names, dates of birth, and other information that was provided to us by the women. We handed off their partners' information and received back 70 some odd hits with partners who had data within the criminal justice system. So 8% had partners who had data. 25% of the women had partners with a general criminal history, meaning the partners had a record, but that record had nothing to do with the victim or our participant. So I hope that makes sense. Megan, I'm looking at you to nod and not nod, so I know that I'm making sense. I think that makes sense to everybody. If not, folks will let me know. Okay. Sorry that the font is so tiny, but these are criminal records of the current partner for women who experienced firearm threat by that current partner at baseline. So in other words, these women experienced firearm threat by their current partner. They told us that at baseline, at that first interview. These are their partner's criminal records. The top half is their partner's general criminal history. On the left side is women who had experienced firearm threat. You'll see that yes column. On the right side is women who had not experienced firearm threat. That's the top. I'll give you a second for that, right? So top is general criminal history. Bottom is criminal history with the woman who participated in our study, with her as the index victim. And then these are whether or not they have criminal records, right? So that one column is yes, they experienced firearm threat. No, they didn't experience firearm threat. And essentially, you can look at the difference. Were there differences between women who experienced firearm threat and women who didn't in terms of the percentage of their partners who had certain types of offenses? And the answer is almost uniformly. Women who had been threatened, their partners are more likely to have all types of criminal offenses. Interestingly enough, except for weapons offenses, generally speaking. And the numbers down at the bottom are a little bit smaller. So violence offenses weren't different and weapons offenses weren't different. One in 4 women said their partner would be willing to use a gun against them. And in terms of the reasons, the most commonly endorsed were that women said he would be willing to use a gun to scare, intimidate, or threaten me, or to avoid a breakup, or to keep me from leaving the relationship. In terms of women's reports of their partner's willingness and intent to harm them with a firearm, and differences between whether or not they experienced firearm threat, we asked, do you think he's willing to use a gun against you? overall, 24%, 25% said yes. The women who had been threatened with a firearm were more likely to say yes. I think he's willing to use a gun against me. But even women who hadn't been threatened with a firearm did believe that he'd still be willing to use a gun against them. Right? And then these are all the different ways we asked. Do you think he'd be willing to use a gun against you? Overall, this is that column. To use a gun to scare, intimidate, or threaten you. To use a gun to avoid a breakup, to hurt you, to kill you, to make you do something sexual that you didn't want to do, to drink, to make you drink or use drugs, to make you trade sex for money. You can see if you look at those who had been threatened with a firearm, those percentages are much higher than if they hadn't been threatened. Whoops, that is just the overall. This is the overall at the beginning. Do you think he intends to hurt you with a gun? Overall, it was 9%. But if you look at the women who had ever been threatened with a firearm, yeah, almost 25% said yes. I think he intends to hurt me with a gun. 30% said they at least sometimes think that their partner is capable of killing them. This is separate from the gun question. This is just overall among women who are abused. 30% said they at least sometimes think their partner is capable of killing them. 9% believe their partner intends to kill them, separate from the gun questions and firearm threat questions. In terms of gun ownership and access, because we know at this point, it's not just about ownership, it has to also be about access. 22% of current partners owned a gun at some point in the relationship. 13% of current partners owned a gun at the time women joined the study. Regardless of ownership, more than a third said it would be very easy. So there was very easy, somewhat easy, I'm not sure, not easy, very difficult, or sorry, somewhat difficult, very difficult. 36% said very easy, that he could get access to a gun if he wanted to, and 42% said he could access a gun in less than a day. That doesn't even include the 31% who said they didn't know how long it would take. So to move on to some of the daily survey data. In terms of the daily data, we looked at experiences of firearm threat throughout those 90 days. And I'm going to share different types of information because there's different ways to think about it. And I apologize. I really don't mean to like dumb this down, but I honestly do this with myself. So please don't be offended as I walk you through, because I swear to God, I'm doing this for like 20 years and I still have to walk myself through to just make sure I'm capturing exactly what I want to capture. So from the daily surveys, you can know how many women experience firearm threat, right? You could take all their surveys over 90 days and group them and say, okay, over the 90 days, how many women said yes ever to experiencing firearm threat? That percentage is 13.6%. At some point in the 90 days, 13.6% or 14% of women said, yes, I experienced firearm threat. It happened in 1.2% of surveys. Remember, we had 16,000 surveys. But if you want the range per person, so any person who said they experienced firearm threat, which if we go over here, there were 33 of them. The range of how many, the percent of surveys that came up in, it came up into up to 79% of surveys completed that they experienced firearm threat. And then if you go down to the specific types, were they threatened with a gun? Did he shoot a gun to scare or harm them? Or did he wave or show a gun in a threatening way? The individual types are broken out. Does that make sense? Okay. Now we're moving on to look at day level within person predictors of firearm threat. So this is statistical prediction. And so we're looking within a day, what's predicting firearm threat. And so here I'm highlighting two things for you. You can see, and it's interesting that these fall on the opposite ends. They're both around kind of firearm access and criminal justice relationships, right? Access to a firearm is the strongest predictor of firearm threat. His access to a firearm is the strongest predictor of firearm threat. 0.61 is, I don't think you really care what it is. It's a standardized regression coefficient, but it's 0.61. And still significant, but less strong, is that she called the police, 0.04. So I know you're thinking, oh, 0.04, that's nothing. It's still a statistically significant predictor of firearm threat. IPV victimization, we're not really surprised, right? Associated with firearm threat. They're predictors of firearm threat. So minor physical IPV, severe physical IPV, sexual abuse, and being stabbed. Interesting that being stabbed is actually a less strong predictor, but nonetheless, almost all of these, except for one, are a predictor. Then we have fear and psychological IPV. And interesting that you can see access to a firearm, again, the strongest predictor, but the next strongest predictors are fear and psych abuse. So verbal abuse, level of fear that he intends to hurt her with a gun, an argument, psychological threat, and then skip minor physical, kind of her being careful not to set him off. Those are significant predictors of firearm threat at the day level. And what you'll see, and you'll see I put yellow text up here next because I don't want people to misunderstand. A breakup on that day is not a significant predictor. The reason I have yellow text here is because I don't want people to misunderstand what this means. We know that being broken up is a risk factor for severe injury and homicide. There is no question about that. That's been shown in study after study. Jackie Campbell, the queen of all homicides, studies and data. This is not to show that that's not a predictor. It's not a predictor at that day level. So what does that mean? That means it's probably not an immediate or proximal predictor that on that day when they break up, that firearm threat is happening, right? So I just want people to interpret that with caution. I don't want this to be misunderstood that, oh, wait a minute, this new data shows that breaking up has nothing to do with firearm threat. That's not what this necessarily shows. I'm always very cautious about people interpreting what I share. Okay. Daily surveys in terms of safety strategies, right? Because part of what we're trying to understand is what safety strategies do women use to help them stay safer? Because let's be real, the onus is not on them to stop the abuse. It's not on them at all, but they can try their best to increase their safety. So we asked women, what kinds of things do you do to stop, prevent, or escape the conflict? So we asked it on a daily basis. And I'm not going to leave this up for long because each slide tells you about the strategies that we asked that fall into these groupings: placating, praying, preparing to leave, creating distance, weapons related, domestic violence services, and criminal justice. And these graphs show the percentages of days where women use these strategies on the left. And then on the right are the percentages of people, again, breaking it down. You can see on the right, many women used placating and prayer and preparing to leave, creating distance. And on the left, many days were characterized by those same strategies, but the distribution is a little bit different depending on how you want to look at it. So if we look at the day level and person level, placating strategies, right? I tried to keep quiet. I tried to stay calm. I tried to pretend that nothing is wrong. We know that women do that all the time. Those strategies were used by 67.5% of participants throughout those 90 days. And they were used on almost 23% of daily surveys. Prayer. I feel the need to stop here and explain this because some people are like, how is that a safety strategy? Explain that to me. So we actually took the safety strategies for these surveys from probably 5 or 6 different places, including domestic violence service providing programs. There have been other studies done on safety strategies. Sherry Hamby has books on safety strategies. working with women, in addition to what Megan introduced me as. I used to work at domestic violence service providers in Rhode Island and in Boston. And I've partnered with CCADV for probably 20 years at the Umbrella Center, Center for Family Justice, lots of places across the state. We pulled this list together. On these daily surveys, we asked what strategies did you use? And then we had another option for others. So they could kind of type in another strategy they used. Within a few weeks of starting this study, an overwhelming number of women wrote in, I prayed. And so we were like, we have to add this as an option. We can't just leave it as letting people write it in, because maybe some people do it, but they don't choose to write it in. So we added it as a strategy. And I'm actually pursuing getting funding to do more research around religious and spiritual coping for women who experience domestic violence. But anyway, you can see it's used by 58% of women in 25% of surveys. And we actually see this in some other projects I've done and support group research that I've done. Preparing to leave, we ask on a daily basis, do you have money or valuables hidden today? Do you have important numbers? Do you have an escape plan? Do you have a code so that others know you're in danger? Do you have car keys or house keys hidden? Do you have a bag packed today? Almost 40% of women said yes on 17% of days. Creating distance. Did you end or try to end the relationship, stay with family or friends, change the locks to improve security? You can see the percentages in front of you. Weapons related. Did you have a knife, gun, or other weapon accessible to you as the participant? Almost 19% said they did on 6% of days, or they removed or hid his gun or weapon. Did you use domestic violence services on that day? Go to a support group, have a safety plan in place, or stay at emergency housing or shelter? Used by almost 21% of participants on 4% of days. And if you think about it, that's because some things you don't need to use more than once. Criminal justice. Did you call the police or have a protective or restraining order in place? 9% of participants on less than 1% of days. Oh, I apologize. That last piece should have been taken off. It's about another set of analyses we did. So the percent of surveys characterized by women who had experienced firearm threat and those who did not, really it's prayer that was used most often, then preparing to leave, then placating, access to weapons, creating distance, DV services, and then criminal justice in that order. Used more, of course, by women who experienced firearm threat than those who did not. With the exception, I think criminal justice is the only one that's not different, and placating. Those two are the only ones that are not different between women who experienced firearm threat and women who did not. Women who did not experience firearm threat and those who did had no difference between how much they used placating and how much they used criminal justice response. So the most used strategies were the three that I mentioned. The least used were criminal justice and DV, which is counter to how we think about providing support and strategies. Megan, how much time do I have left? Or do I need to stop here?
You have about 10 minutes.
Do you want me to leave those 10 minutes for questions, or do people, we can talk about how we promoted safety, because some people are a little bit concerned about how we have women participate in a study where they answer questions daily. People are concerned about the safety.
Do folks have questions that they want to start to get in now, or you want to go through the safety protocol? I think you can go through the safety and then we can leave room for some questions. Yeah.
Okay, it's pretty quick. So people are very concerned about the safety of this. To be honest with you, the first study I actually did was about safety because no one had done this before. And the concern, understandably so, is this really safe for people to do? And at first, Yale even said no, even though I had received a grant from the National Institute of Health to do this. They're like, no, that's not safe. You can't do this. And then one of the ways that I had women participate is I had these pre-printed surveys just one double-sided, one page folded, and asked them to answer the survey and send it in daily in this envelope. And Yale said, absolutely not safe. And I said, can we try it out with 10 women? Can we trust their judgment and see if they can hide it like they hide other things? And can we hear back from them if it's safe? And we did that. And the women were like, no problem, I can do this. Now that speaks to self-selection. It's only women who can participate, right? So we know we're not getting the most severely abused women, but the range of severity abuse in my studies is full. We have women who've been shot at. I mean, it's full. But anyway, there were ways that we had to look at on a daily basis. Did women report future intent, that they thought their partner intends to hurt them with a gun in the future? Anything more than 3 triggered this risk flag protocol. If they said anything about serious threat, that he threatened to hurt or kill her with a gun, or that he waved or showed a gun in threatening way, that he stabbed her with a knife or other sharp object, or actually shot a gun to hurt or scare her. During that first interview, we asked women what they would like us to do. It was survivor defined, victim centered. What do you want us to do if any of those risk flags come up? We gave them options. Do you want us to do nothing? Because let's be real, we don't know what helps them to stay safe. There isn't a one size fits all. If we call the police, we don't know that there's going to be arrest made, obviously. If we call domestic violence services, we don't know what works. So we ask them to tell us, do you want us to not intervene? Do you want us to text or call you? Do you want us to contact a friend or family member? Do you want us to call the police? And they could change their mind at any time. So essentially, across types, 31% of people said at least once, don't intervene. 76% said, call me. 10% said, call a family or friend. 28% said, call the police. And it depended by the type of threat. So if the question that raised the protocol was that I think he might hurt me in the future, most people said, don't intervene, but many said, text me or call me. Almost no one said call a friend or family member of the police. For serious threat, it was a little bit more. Yeah, 1% fewer said don't do anything. A little bit more said call me, and more said call the police. Serious injury, more people said call the police. So as the risk elevated, women were evaluating their situation and said, yeah, you got to do more for each increase level of threat. So just sharing that, because people have said, how could you possibly do this, and sleep at night? And we've had people say all sorts of things to us. But that's your answer. And we did not, knock wood, there were no adverse events. We also found out that a higher proportion of women who had versus had not experienced firearm threat in their lifetime preferred to have friends and family called. More women who had experienced firearm threat by their current partner preferred to have family and friends called, and same in terms of serious injury. Also, those who had children preferred to have the police called, right? Because they were worried about their kids. So my last slide, note of caution, please interpret these findings with caution. This study was conducted during COVID and largely included women from the community, not court or DV service providers, which means the rates of IPV and firearm threat are underrepresented. So we know from other research that we've done and others have done, firearm threat would be higher, much higher, if we had recruited women from the Office of Victim Advocate at the court and through domestic violence service providers. So I'll go ahead and stop share there.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Anybody have questions?
Please call me Tammy.
Thank you, Tammy.
The only one who calls me that is my mom.
I have a question, Megan.
Sure, Joe.
Dr. Sullivan, thank you as always. We've been colleagues for a long time, and I completely respect all your research and your leadership in the area of domestic violence. Just wondering, when is the next email or phone call I'm going to get for more data as you compare this with court-based people?
Joe, you have been a saint. If it was not for you, we would not have these data. I appreciate you and I thank you so much. We're getting through the protective order registry data because one thing that's really important is understanding the sanctions and understanding how that impacts safety. But our staff has to go through that. And for folks who understand the protective order registry, it's a lot to get through. And so we have to manually enter that. And so I don't know, Joe, I don't know how long it will be before the next call. But thank you for being willing to accept it.
Always.
Any
Thank you,
other?
Tammy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Any other questions or comments? Okay. All right, hearing none, I just want to thank you for your time. That was really, really helpful. I just want to reiterate, we will send out the presentation after the meeting today. And if you do have questions that you want to follow up, is it okay to add your contact information? So we'll add Tammy's contact information too, if you have any questions that you want to follow up with individually. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the subcommittee reports. Law model policy, Chief Fox.
Good afternoon, once again, everyone. The Law Enforcement Model Policy Subcommittee met on April 15th, and we believe that we are nearing or are at the endpoint for the developments and the additions, modifications that we would like to see, at least in this iteration. To the extent that you have either electronically or in paper fashion, for those of us that are here live, there are, in total, there are 3 areas I will draw your attention to. First one would be on pages 7 and 8. Either electronically or in written form. Working from color copies, you will see both red and blue. And what you'll see in the red is the elimination of what I'm referring to as the old LAP language. And in blue, you'll see the insertion of the new LAP language. I'm certainly in a position to go through it in detail if anybody should want, but in overview, what we've done is move the LAP language that before was discretionary into a mandatory piece of the statewide model policy. I do not anticipate any resistance from the law enforcement family in this regard. The LAP model has proven itself time and time again, and law enforcement has been on board with that for quite some time. So pages 7 and 8, the red is out, the blue is in. Next, drawing your attention to page 22, you will see once again red and blue. The red language is merely one bullet, and it references, refer to federal domestic violence law material as to the seizure of firearms. The blue bullets, there are 6 of them now, lay out in great detail the process that is in place, largely is in place, I suppose I should say, for law enforcement response when an individual is prohibited from possessing firearms under restraining orders, protective orders, or after suffering a domestic violence, one of the specific domestic violence type of convictions. I would take us all back in time, perhaps 20 years or so, for anyone that was around at this time. There had been a couple of horrific domestic violence firearms offenses committed by individuals who still maintain firearms despite the fact that they were not supposed to have them. There was a working agreement. We believe it took the form of an MOU, although no one could lay hands on that MOU, that was signed off on by then Commissioner Spada, which tells you how old it was in the state police world. It was signed off on by the Chiefs of Police Association. There were a number of other signatories that memorialized the bullets that you largely see in blue on pages 22. However, as what happens with many things, that's an MOU that doesn't get passed on, that doesn't get memorialized. My co-chair found a couple of agencies that maybe were not as refreshed as they should be as to what that protocol called for. So we have simply on page 22 eliminated the short reference and inserted the appropriate protocol in the blue, page 22. Finally, although you do not see it in this draft, my group also went slightly beyond its charge, and we did develop some language that we thought was appropriate as to law enforcement's obligation to attempt to serve and reserve if the first service was not successful, pending arrest warrants. And rather than advance that through our committee, we did proffer that language to the arrest warrants and orders of protection, compliance, enforcement, and outcomes subcommittee for their consideration. And then I guess in closing, I don't know what the chair thinks the most appropriate way to do this would be, but we are certainly happy, at least for those first two recommendations, to have the full committee vote to accept those at whatever point you think is appropriate. Our work is largely done, we believe.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate now. We can make a motion to accept the changes. I need a motion to accept the changes.
I don't know if it's appropriate to second my own language changes.
Probably not. Joe, you want to second it? Okay. And any discussion? Okay, no discussion, then all in favor to accept the changes as proposed by the Law Model Policy Subcommittee.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Great. Motion carries. Thank you. And thank you for all of your hard work on this, because this was, I know, a
Credit
labor
to
of
you.
love. Thank you, Karen, for your hard work too. Okay, moving on to arrest warrants and orders of protection. Gail?
I'm actually.
Oh, Shauna, I apologize.
Okay.
Sorry.
So we've been largely focusing our recommendation on our recommendation to the larger council around developing a more secure procedure for ensuring firearm seizure and compliance in accordance with the surrender provision of protective and restraining orders. Our subcommittee met on March 19th, where we had Bree Maurice from the Special Licensing and Firearms Unit briefly explain the firearm seizure and compliance process in Connecticut. We also had Darren Mitchell of the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges join us to give an overview of his process in working with states on firearm seizure and compliance policies and to answer questions. We've since met with Judicial to determine next steps and are working with Mr. Mitchell to secure a date in the near future when he can meet with us. And we hope that in year 2, we'll be able to address any concerns and challenges Connecticut may have in its current process and potentially invite Mr. Mitchell here to work with us.
Okay, great. Any questions for Shauna or Gail? Okay. All right, hearing none. We'll move on to offender intervention standards. Merritt, are you reporting out?
I am today. Thank you.
Excellent.
Good afternoon again. So the Offender Programs Subcommittee met last week, and we discussed what we're going to do moving forward. So we took a look at the call of the council, and we decided that our next steps were going to be to look at the Family Violence Education Program. Joe, as his role with Judicial, is going to be our data guru, I'm happy to say. So we're going to be getting a lot more information, data on the Family Violence Education Program to review. So we're going to be looking at that, as well as we're going to be reaching out to DOC to take a look at their IPV classes. We don't really know much about what those classes look like and whether they meet the standards. So we're going to take a look at that as well. And then one of our recommendations made last year was on a form for the prosecutor's use to know when offenders have completed successfully counseling or some other treatment therapy. And so Gail reported to us that they did have another meeting. The form is moving along. It's going to be housed in DCJ. And I guess there's going to be one more meeting, and we expect probably implementation beginning in the summer. Is that correct, Gail? Okay. Yeah, and that's our report. Joe, did I leave anything out?
No, you did an excellent job. Thank you, Merritt.
That's great. Any questions for Merritt or anybody else on the council? Okay. I just want to say everybody's made great progress. So from law model policy to offender interventions, like we're making a lot of progress in just 1 year. So I want to thank everybody for their hard work on the subcommittees. It's really exciting to see some of the changes that we've already been able to make in 1 year. So I'm excited for the coming year ahead. Any other business that anyone wants to bring before the council?
Megan,
Yes.
do you think that it would be helpful if the chairs and the chairs of all the subcommittees got together and kind of took a look at how the last year has worked and assess going forward from there? Do you think that's necessary? I think our subcommittees are looking for a little direction. That's the feeling I'm getting. So I'm just curious if you think that would be helpful or like to hear anybody else's feedback.
I mean, I think it's a great idea. I think we could certainly schedule something after session before our next meeting or even over the summer months for people to get together, the co-chairs of the subcommittees and the chairs. I just want to be mindful of, everybody's different perspectives on that too, and just managing expectations with that.
I think we also have some vacancies. I know at least we have CJ's vacancy that we need to address. So I'm not sure if that could be part of that meeting. That'd be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, we can get that scheduled. That was a great suggestion, Mayor. Thank you.
I just have to confess, it wasn't mine. I've just brought it forward.
Well, whoever's it was a great suggestion. So we can get that scheduled for over the summer months. Any other business folks wanted to bring before the council? Okay. Hearing none, just a reminder, we'll meet on July 30th as our next meeting. I believe we will be in the same room, same time, and we'll certainly have the Zoom option. If nothing further, I'll just ask for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Karen. Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your week.
Gail Hardy and Mayor, I think we're going to try to meet through this this venue instead of going on Teams. So if you just hang on here.
Joe, should we
I don't think you can
stay
do it
on this?
I don't think you can do it on this one.
Okay, we're all set then.